hollow choir welcome to Macabre Whispers, where the darkness breathes and the shadows hum with secrets. Tonight we delve into the chilling tale of the Hollow Choir, a story from the forgotten village of Wraithmoor, nestled deep in the English moors, where the wind carries a song no one should hear. Lock your doors, dim the lights, and listen closely. Because the choir is calling that Clara Henshaw was a music teacher, weary of city life, when she stumbled across an advert for a teaching post in Wraithmoor. The village was a speck on the map, surrounded by endless moors that seemed to swallow the horizon. The pay was modest, but the promise of peace drew her in. She packed her violin, her only companion since her husband's death, and drove through twisting lanes under a sky heavy with clouds. Wraithmoor greeted her with silence. No birds sang, no dogs barked. The village square was empty, its cobblestones slick with mist. The houses, squat and gray, leaned inward as if guarding a secret. At the schoolhouse, a crumbling building with ivy-choked walls, the headmistress, Mrs. Vane, welcomed Clara. She was a tall woman, her face sharp as a blade, her eyes like polished stones. She handed Clara a key and a warning: stay indoors after dusk. The moors, she said, were no place for the living at night, but Clara brushed it off as rural superstition. Her first day teaching was strange. The children, pale and silent, stared at her with unblinking eyes. They didn't laugh or fidget. When she asked them to sing, their voices were flat, almost hollow, yet perfectly in tune, as if guided by an unseen hand. Their song, an old hymn she didn't recognize, sent a shiver down her spine. The lyrics spoke of a choir that sang for the lost, a melody that bound souls to the earth. After class, a girl named Lily lingered. She was small, her hair a tangle of black, her voice barely a whisper. She told Clara not to listen to the singing at night. Before Clara could ask more, Lily ran off, vanishing into the fog dot. That night, Clara settled into her rented cottage at the village's edge. The walls creaked, and the windows rattled as the wind howled across the moors. She tuned her violin to drown out the noise, but as she played, she heard it. A faint hum, like voices carried on the breeze. It wasn't the wind. It was singing, low and mournful, weaving through the night. Her fingers froze on the strings. The melody was the same hymn the children had sung, but richer, layered, as if sung by 100 throats. It came from the moors, pulling at her like a tide. She peered through the window, her breath fogging the glass. The moors were a sea of shadow, but far out, a faint light flickered, swaying like a lantern. The singing grew louder, her name woven into the notes. "Clara, come to us." She bolted the door, her heart pounding, and stuffed cotton in her ears, but the song seeped through, curling into her thoughts. She didn't sleep. At dawn, the singing stopped, leaving only silence. Exhausted, she confronted Mrs. Vane at the schoolhouse, demanding answers. The headmistress's smile was thin. She said the moors had always sung, a quirk of the wind through the hollows, but her eyes betrayed her. They darted to the window, towards the moors. Clara wasn't convinced. She noticed the children were fewer that day. Lily was gone. When she asked where the girl was, the other students stared blankly, as if Lily had never existed, set determined to uncover the truth. Clara visited the village library, a dusty room above the church. The librarian, an old man with trembling hands, flinched when she mentioned the singing. He handed her a crumbling book, its pages yellow, titled The Lore of Wraithmoor. It told of a choir, not a people, but of something older, something that lived in the moors. Long ago, the village had struck a pact with them. Every generation, they offered a soul, a stranger, an outsider, to keep the choir sated. In return, the village was spared. The last entry, dated 1953, described a teacher who vanished after hearing the song. Her name was scratched out, but the initials were C.H. Clara's initials, Dot. Her blood ran cold. She left the library, the book clutched to her chest, and noticed the villagers watching her. Shopkeepers, farmers, even children, their faces blank but their eyes heavy with knowing. She was the stranger, the offering. That night she packed her bags, determined to flee, but the singing returned. Louder, closer, vibrating in her bones. Her violin, untouched, began to hum, its strings trembling as if played by phantom hands. The melody was intoxicating, promising peace, belonging, an end to her grief. Her husband's face flashed in her mind, his voice blending with the choir. "Join us, Clara." She fought it, slamming her hands over her ears, but the song was inside her now, pulling her toward the door. Her feet moved against her will, unlocking the bolt, stepping into the cold. The moors stretched before her, the flickering light brighter, closer, pulsing like a heartbeat. She walked, the grass crunching underfoot, the song drowning her thoughts. The light led her to a hollow, a sunken pit, ringed with stones carved with strange symbols. In the center stood the choir, not people, but shapes, tall and thin, their forms shimmering like heat waves. Their faces were featureless, yet she felt their gaze. They sang, their voices a tapestry of longing and hunger, and among them stood Lily, her eyes empty, her mouth moving with the hymn. Clara's legs buckled, but the song held her upright. The shapes reached for her, their touch like ice, and she saw flashes of others, men, women, children, all lured to this place, their lives woven to the choir's endless hymn. She saw the teacher from 1953, her face a mirror of Clara's, screaming silently. The book had lied. The choir didn't want one soul. It wanted all of them forever. Clara's violin, still in her hand, felt heavy, real. With a surge of defiance, she raised it and smashed it against the nearest stone. The strings snapped, the wood splintered, and the song faltered, the shapes recoiling as if struck Dot. She ran, the choir's scream tearing through the air, a sound like glass shattering. The light flickered out, and the moors fell silent. She stumbled through the dark, her lungs burning, until she reached her car. The engine roared to life, and she sped away, the village shrinking in her rearview mirror. Dawn broke as she crossed the county line, the moors a distant smudge. She stopped at a petrol station, her hands shaking, and noticed a scrap of paper in her pocket. It was a page from the book, but the words had changed. The choir never forgets. It will sing again. Dot. Months later, Clara settled in a new city, far from Wraithmoor. She never played music again. But sometimes, in the dead of night, she wakes to a faint hum, the hymn creeping back, her name whispered in the dark. She checks the locks, draws the curtains, and prays it's only the wind. But deep down, she knows. The choir is patient. It's waiting. Dot. That was the hollow choir, a tale of hunger and haunting song. Did Clara truly escape, or is the choir still calling her name? Share your thoughts below, and if this story chilled your bones, hit that like button and subscribe to Macabre Whispers for more terrors that linger in the silence. Until next time, beware the songs you cannot unhear. The Collector of Whispers and the quiet town of Ashwood. Nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, there stood a small, unassuming antique shop called the Collector's Corner. It was a place where time seemed to stand still, its windows dusty, and its shelves crammed with relics of bygone eras. The shop's owner, Mr. Silas Gray, was a man of few words, his face lined with age and his eyes sharp as glass. He had lived in Ashwood for as long as anyone could remember, and though he rarely spoke to anyone, his presence was a constant in the town. One rainy afternoon, a young woman named Clara stepped into the shop, seeking shelter from the downpour. She was new to Ashwood, having moved there to escape the chaos of city life and start fresh. The shop's dim interior, lit only by flickering candles, drew her in with its promise of mystery. As she browsed the cluttered shelves, her fingers brushed against an old leather-bound journal tucked behind a stack of tarnished silverware. The cover was worn, its edges frayed, but something about it called to her. Without thinking, she picked it up and flipped it open. The first page was blank, but as she turned to the second, she found a single sentence written in elegant, looping script. "The whispers are loudest when you're alone." Clara shivered, though she couldn't say why. She glanced around, half expecting Mr. Gray to appear and tell her to put it back, but the shop was empty. She hesitated, then tucked the journal into her bag, telling herself she'd return it later. That night, back in her small, rented cottage, Clara sat by the fire and opened the journal again. This time, she found more entries, dozens of them, each one more unsettling than the last. They were written in different hands, some neat and precise, others frantic and scrawled. Each entry spoke of hearing whispers, soft, insistent voices that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. One entry read, "They call my name at night. They know things about me, things I've never told anyone." Another said, "I see them now in the shadows. They're not human. They're something else." The final entry, written in shaky letters, simply said, "It's too late. They found me." Clara closed the journal, her heart pounding. It was just a collection of stories, she told herself, nothing more. But as the night wore on, she began to hear it, a faint whispering, like voices carried on the wind. She checked the windows, ensuring they were locked, but the sound persisted, growing clearer with each passing minute. It was as if the whispers were inside her head, murmuring secrets she didn't want to know. She buried her face in her pillow, trying to block them out, but they only grew louder. The next morning, Claire returned to the collector's corner, determined to return the journal. Mr. Gray was behind the counter, polishing an old pocket watch. He looked up as she entered, his gaze piercing. "You brought it back," he said, his voice gravelly. "Most don't." "What do you mean?" Clara asked. Setting the journal on the counter, Mr. Gray's eyes flicked to the journal, then back to her. "That book collects whispers, stories from those who've heard them. It's not for everyone. Some say it's cursed. Others say it's a warning." Clara laughed nervously. "It's just a book. Stories." "Is it?" Mr. Gray leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Have you heard them yet? The whispers?" Clara's blood ran cold. She hadn't told anyone about the voices. "How did you—" "Everyone who touches that book hears them eventually," he interrupted. "But not everyone listens. You're still here, so you haven't listened yet. Be careful. Once you do, they'll never let you go." Clara left the shop, her mind racing. She tried to dismiss Mr. Gray's words as superstition, but the whispers followed her home. That night they were louder, more insistent. They spoke of her past, her childhood fears, her regrets, things she'd buried deep. And then they began to speak of her future. "You'll stay here forever, with us." Days turned into weeks, and Clara's life began to unravel. She stopped sleeping, stopped eating. The whispers were constant now, a cacophony of voices that drowned out her own thoughts. She saw shapes in the corners of her eyes, shadowy figures that vanished when she turned to look. Her friends from town stopped calling, saying she seemed different, distant. She knew they were right, but she couldn't explain why. One evening, desperate for answers, Clara returned to the collector's corner. The shop was closed, its windows dark. But she pounded on the door until Mr. Gray opened it, his expression grim. "You've listened," he said, not asking. "I need to make it stop," Clara pleaded. "Please tell me how." Mr. Gray sighed, stepping aside to let her in. "There's only one way. You have to give them what they want." "What do they want?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. "Your story," he said simply. "They feed on fear, on pain. They want you to write it down, to give it to them. Once you do, they'll leave you alone." Clara stared at him, horrified. "But then what happens to me?" Mr. Gray's eyes were sad. "You become part of the collection. Your story joins the others. At least you'll be free." Clara left the shop, clutching the journal she'd taken again. That night, she sat at her desk and began to write. She poured out everything. The whispers, the shadows, her fear. As she wrote, the voices grew quieter, fading into the background like a distant storm. By dawn, she had filled page after page, her hand aching, her mind numb. When she finished, she felt a strange calm settle over her. The whispers were gone. The shadows had receded. She stood, walked to the fireplace, and tossed the journal into the flames. As it burned, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. But as she turned to leave the room, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the mirror. For a split second, it wasn't her face staring back. It was Mr. Gray's, his eyes cold and knowing. Then it was gone, and Clara was alone. She never returned to the collector's corner. She never spoke of the journal again. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls through the trees, she swears she can hear faint whispers, new voices telling new stories. And she wonders if, somewhere in Ashwood, another soul has found the journal and begun to listen. Welcome to Macabre Whispers, where the shadows hold their breath and the past never truly sleeps. Tonight we slip into the chilling tale of Asterisk, the forgotten guest Asterisk, a story set in the decaying grandeur of Blackthorn Manor, a place where the walls remember more than they should. Lock your doors, draw the curtains, and listen closely. The guest is waiting. Eleanor Price was a photographer, drawn to abandoned places where time had left its mark. When she heard about Blackthorn Manor, an old estate hidden in the English countryside, she couldn't resist. The manor had been empty for decades, its last residents, a wealthy family named Harrow, vanishing without a trace in 1923. Locals whispered of curses, of strange lights in the windows, but Eleanor saw only opportunity. A photo series on Blackthorn could revive her struggling career. Armed with her camera and a flashlight, she drove through winding lanes, the manor's silhouette looming against a moonless sky. The gates were rusted, half open, as if inviting her in. The manor itself was a labyrinth of sagging beams and peeling wallpaper, its air thick with dust and something sweeter like rotting flowers. Eleanor's flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing chandeliers draped in cobwebs, portraits with eyes that seemed to follow her. She snapped photos, each click echoing in the silence. In the grand dining hall, she found a table set for a feast. Plates, silverware, even wine glasses, all untouched, as if the guests had simply walked away. A single chair was pulled out, its cushions sagging under an invisible weight. She moved upstairs, her footsteps muffled by threadbare carpets. In a bedroom, she found a mirror, its surface clouded, but oddly warm to the touch. Her reflection stared back, but something was wrong. Her eyes in the mirror were wide, panicked, while she felt calm. She stepped back, her breath catching, and heard it. A soft, rhythmic tapping, like fingers drumming on wood. It came from the hallway. She followed the sound, her flashlight flickering, to a locked door at the end of the corridor. The tapping stopped. She pressed her ear to the wood and heard a whisper, faint but clear. "You're late." Eleanor's heart raced. She wasn't alone. She called out, her voice trembling, but no one answered. The whisper came again, closer now, from behind her. "You were invited." She spun around, her flashlight sweeping the empty hall. The air grew colder, the sweet scent stronger. She tried the door, her hands shaking, and it creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase leading up. Against her better judgment, she climbed, each step groaning under her weight. The attic was vast, cluttered with trunks and broken furniture, lit by a single window where moonlight spilled like blood. In the center stood a figure, a woman in a tattered gown, her face hidden by a veil. She didn't move, didn't breathe, but Eleanor felt her gaze heavy and unyielding. The woman's hands clutched an invitation, its edges charred with Eleanor's name written in elegant script. "You came," the woman said, her voice a dry rasp, like leaves skittering across stone. Eleanor stammered, backing away, but the attic door slammed shut. The woman glided forward, her veil lifting to reveal a face that wasn't a face. Empty sockets, a lipless mouth, yet it smiled. The Harrows never forget a guest. Eleanor's flashlight died, plunging her into darkness. The whispers multiplied, a chorus now, chanting her name, recounting her life, her failures, her loneliness, secrets she'd buried deep. Hands brushed her skin, cold and clammy, pulling at her clothes, her hair. She screamed, stumbling toward the window, and saw them, figures in the moonlight. Dozens of them, all in old-fashioned attire, their faces hollow, their eyes fixed on her. They were the Harrows, or what was left of them, bound to the manor by a pact they'd made long ago. The invitation burned in her pocket, searing her skin. She hadn't found it. She'd been given it, summoned. Desperate, Eleanor smashed the window, glass shattering into the night. The whispers turned to shrieks, the hands tightening. She climbed onto the ledge, the ground far below, and jumped. Pain exploded in her legs as she hit the grass. But she ran, the manor's lights flaring behind her, the chorus screaming her name. She reached her car, fumbling with the keys, and sped away, the manor shrinking in her rearview mirror. Months later, Eleanor moved to a new city, her photos of Blackthorn unsold, her camera untouched. She told herself she'd escaped. But at night, when the world was quiet, she heard it. A faint tapping, like fingers on wood. Her mailbox began to fill with envelopes, each one blank except for her name in that same elegant script. She burned them, but they kept coming. One night, she woke to find her bedroom mirror glowing, her reflection smiling, holding an invitation. The door creaked open, and the sweet scent filled the air. Footsteps approached, slow and deliberate. That was Asterisk, the Forgotten Guests say Asterisk, a tale of invitations that cannot be refused. Did Eleanor outrun the Harrows, or is she still their guest, forever marked? Share your thoughts below, and if this story sent shivers down your spine, hit that like button and subscribe to Macabre Whispers for more horrors that cling to the soul. Until next time, check your invitations carefully. Some guests never leave. Did Eleanor outrun the Harrows, or is she still their guest, forever marked? Share your thoughts below, and if this story sent shivers down your spine, hit that like button and subscribe to Macabre Whispers for more horrors that cling to the soul. Until next time, check your invitations carefully. Some guests never leave.